Welcome to the arena. If you are watching this, it is because the standard reality, the one built on fairness, hard work, and transparency, has failed you. You have realized that the world is not governed by merit, but by the cold biological physics of power. This is not a summary. This is a sovereign reprogramming. You are entering a 2-hour journey that will dismantle every illusion you have ever held about human behavior. This is the frequency of the Audiobook Empire, a space reserved for those who no longer wish to be pawns, but architects of their own destiny. The common man lives in a state of naive certainty. He believes that people are generally good, that logic dictates decisions, and that if he is honest, the world will be honest with him. This is a high cortisol delusion. It is a survival mechanism for the weak to avoid the terrifying truth. Human nature is a chaotic, irrational, and predatory landscape. To navigate it, you must first achieve a state of biological neutrality. You must learn to see the grid beneath the skin. Over the next 120 minutes, we are going to perform a clinical dissection of the human soul based on Robert Greene's masterpiece, The Laws of Human Nature. But we are not just analyzing text, we are installing a new sovereign operating system into your mind. Why does the world feel so chaotic to you? Why do you feel betrayed by those you trusted or blindsided by the moves of your rivals? It is because you are looking at the mask, not the machine. Most people walk through life as cortisol-leaking reactors. They are slaves to their ancestral programming, ancient instincts of envy, narcissism, and fear that were designed for a world that no longer exists. They react to triggers they don't understand and justify their irrationality with a thin layer of logic. The sovereign, however, is the still point. You are the one who watches the storm without being moved by it. To reach this state, you must accept the brutal reality of the ancestral shadow. You must realize that your own brain is your first and most dangerous adversary. In this session, we will explore the first 10 laws of human nature. These are the invisible laws of gravity that govern social status, professional success, and personal sovereignty. We will start with the law of irrationality, teaching you how to master the rider and the horse within your own mind. We will move to narcissism, showing you how to turn self-obsession into a tool of empathy and influence. We will dissect the role-playing of the masses, the compulsive behavior of the weak, and the shadow that everyone tries to hide, but no one can escape. This is a journey into the dark room of the human psyche. The weight of this knowledge is heavy. It requires a high testosterone of character to look into the mirror and see the primitive animals staring back. Most people will turn off this video within the first 10 minutes. The density of the truth will be too much for their fragile egos. They prefer the dopamine siphon of easy lies and comfortable narratives. But you are different. You have remained still. You have chosen to listen. This choice alone marks you as a potential sovereign. You are ready to stop hoping for success and start engineering it. You are ready to move from a state of social victimhood to a state of predatory grace. As we move through these laws, your perception will undergo a radical recalibration. You will begin to see status battles where you once saw conversations. You will see insecurity masks where you once saw confidence. You will realize that every smile, every frown, and every silence is a signal in a vast, complex grid of power. You will stop seeking to be liked and start seeking to be effective. In the forest of human nature, there is no fairness. There is only the hunter and the devoured. By the end of these 2 hours, you will have the eyes of the hunter. This is the Audiobook Empire. We don't just provide information, we provide the structural soul for your ambition. The throne of your own life has been empty for too long. It is time for you to occupy it. The world is a liquid. The sovereign is the solid object that determines its shape. We are about to begin the most important audit of your life, the audit of your own nature. If you are ready for the burden of absolute sight, if you are ready to become inevitable, then do not move. The first law, the foundation of all power, is about to be revealed. The primary flaw of the human condition is the delusion of rationality. We're told from birth that we are thinking creatures, that our decisions are the result of conscious deliberation and logic. This is the linguistic trap. In reality, humans are biologically driven by emotional currents that are far older and more powerful than the thin layer of the prefrontal cortex. The common man is a slave to his emotional inflections. He reacts to fear, he is blinded by hope, and he is paralyzed by envy. He spends his life reacting to the world and then using his intellect to construct a logical-sounding excuse for his irrational behavior. To be a sovereign, you must accept the clinical truth. You are not rational. Your brain is a rationalizing machine, not a rational machine. To master others, you must first master the biochemistry of your own soul. You must achieve a state of internal stillness that allows you to witness your emotions without being consumed by them. Most people are cortisol-driven. They are in a constant state of low-level panic, reacting to every stimulus, every digital notification, and every perceived slight. This makes them predictable, and in the arena of power, predictability is a death sentence. The anatomy of the internal saboteur. Within you, there is a constant struggle between the rider, the rational mind, and the horse, the ancient emotional impulses. The horse is powerful, fast, and driven by primal needs, fear, pleasure, and survival. The rider is intelligent but physically weak compared to the horse. The common man allows the horse to bolt, and then the rider simply explains why the horse went in that direction. The sovereign, however, learns to train the horse. You do not suppress your emotions, you enclose them. You recognize that your feelings are ancestral signals designed for a world of physical predators, not the digital grid of 2026. One of the most lethal status leaks in Law 1 is the confirmation bias. Your brain is hardwired to seek out information that proves what you already feel. If you are insecure about your position, you will interpret every silent room as a conspiracy against you. If you are in love with an idea, you will ignore every piece of data that suggests it will fail. The sovereign practices cognitive aggression against himself. You must intentionally seek out the flaws in your own logic. You must be the harshest critic of your own guts. By doing this, you ensure that your strategy is built on the rock of reality rather than the sand of emotion. The protocol of the third-party observer. How do you achieve this mastery? You must install the third-party observer protocol into your consciousness. When you feel a surge of anger, a flush of envy, or a sudden paralyzing fear, you do not act. You step outside of your own biological frame. You look at yourself as if you were a specimen under a microscope. You say to yourself, "My body is currently experiencing a cortisol spike because it perceives a status threat. This is a biological relic. It is not the truth." This evaluative distance is the foundation of all power. While your rival is red-faced and shouting, or paralyzed and trembling, you are still. You are calculating. You have moved the battle from the limbic system to the executive center. Furthermore, we must address the lethality of the 15-minute rule. In the modern grid, we are pressured to react instantly. This is a trap designed for the average processor. The sovereign understands that the chemical storm of an emotion has a biological shelf life. If you can wait 15 minutes before responding to an insult or an opportunity, the intensity of the emotion will subside and the rider will regain control. This is the bio-sovereignty of timing. By forcing yourself to wait, You ensure that your response is a strategic move rather than an emotional reaction. You are the only one in the room who is acting with inevitable intent. The 3 cognitive distortions of the weak. To master Law 1, you must identify and neutralize the 3 distortions that blind the masses. Appearance bias. We judge people by their masks. We assume the confident man is competent and the quiet man is weak. The sovereign looks at the patterns, not the packaging. Confirmation bias. As discussed, we look for what we want to see. The sovereign looks for what he needs to see, especially if it's uncomfortable. The conviction bias. People believe that if they feel something strongly, it must be true. They mistake intensity for accuracy. The sovereign knows that the most intense emotions are often the most deceptive. In the high-stakes theater of 2026, your internal clarity is your most valuable asset. The world is full of emotional noise, outrage, fear, and hype. The sovereign remains a solid object. You do not post in anger. You do not buy in hope. You do not sell in fear. You are the anchor of rationality in a sea of irrationality. By mastering the first law, you have secured your foundation. You are no longer a victim of your own chemistry. You are the chief chemist of your reality. As we move forward, remember, you are the rider. The world is full of uncontrolled horses. Your power lies in the gap between the stimulus and your response. Master that gap, and you master the world. Now that we have established the third-party observer protocol, we must transition into the offensive phase of this law, the sovereign radar for human bias. A sovereign does not merely monitor himself, he learns to decode the emotional leaks of everyone in his orbit. Humans are in a constant state of chemical leakage. Their micro-expressions, the tone of their voice, and the rhythm of their breathing reveal the emotional horse that is truly in command. When you realize that a rival is acting out of a deep-seated wound to their ego rather than professional logic, you possess the keys to move them like pieces on a chessboard. You do not argue with their logic, you feed their emotion to lead them into the trap you have prepared. The most lethal tactic in this arena is the emotional vacuum. The common man feels an urgent need to fill any silence in a conversation, leaking information and status in the process. The sovereign, however, utilizes tactical silence to create psychological pressure. When you remain still and emotionally neutral, others begin to feel an encroaching anxiety. This discomfort forces them to try and please you or reveal their cards prematurely. You are not reacting to their energy. You are making them revolve around your stillness. Always remember, the first person to get angry in a room is the first person to lose control over the reality frame. True power lies in being the coldest object in the room while everyone else is burning with reactive fire. Furthermore, you must guard against the trap of over-optimism. The sovereign understands that the human brain is biologically biased to believe what it desires to be true. When you see an opportunity that looks too perfect, realize that your confirmation bias is blinding you to the structural risks. The true leader practices the strategic premortem. He imagines the total failure of a project and analyzes the emotional reasons that led to that collapse before a single move is made. By doing this, you kill false hope and replace it with strategic certainty. Rationality is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to put those emotions in a glass cage and observe them as they try to influence you without ever handing them the keys to the kingdom. To master Law 1, you must accept that your battle with irrationality is a daily engagement. There is no final state of total rationality. There is only constant vigilance. When you master this law, you become the only person in the room who sees the strings moving the human puppets. You will watch the human drama around you like a fascinating cinematic event, but you will never be an actor in it. You are the director, the producer, and the one who has the final word. You have secured your psychological foundation, and you are now ready to face the most dangerous gravitational force in human nature. The second law of human nature is the principle of social gravity. To understand the world, you must first accept a biological truth that most people spend their entire lives denying. Every human being you meet is, to some degree, a narcissist. From the moment we are born, we are the center of our own universe. We are the protagonist of our own movie, and everyone else is merely a supporting character in the drama of our lives. This is not a moral failure, it is a survival mechanism. Our self-image is the psychological shield that protects us from the terrifying realization that we are small, fragile, and often insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos. The common man is a slave to this gravity. He spends his energy seeking validation, fishing for compliments, and reacting with hidden resentment when he is ignored. The sovereign, however, realizes that this universal self-obsession is the ultimate tactical opening. By understanding the narcissism of others, you gain the power to influence them from the inside out. You stop fighting against their ego and start navigating it. To master this law, you must first recognize the spectrum of narcissism. On one end, you have the deep narcissist. These are individuals whose self-image is so fragile that they have lost the ability to connect with anyone else's reality. They are black holes of attention. If you are not serving their ego, you do not exist to them. They are masters of the sob story and the subtle guilt trip, using their perceived vulnerabilities to chain you to their needs. The sovereign, however, realizes that this universal self-obsession is the ultimate tactical opening. By understanding the narcissism of others, you gain the power to influence them from the inside out. You stop fighting against their ego and start navigating it. To master this law, you must first recognize the spectrum of narcissism. On one end, you have the deep narcissist. These are individuals whose self-image is so fragile that they have lost the ability to connect with anyone else's reality. They are black holes of attention. If you are not serving their ego, you do not exist to them. They are masters of the sob story and the subtle guilt trip, using their perceived vulnerabilities to chain you to their needs. The sovereign, however, realizes that this universal self-obsession is the ultimate tactical opening. By understanding the narcissism of others, you gain the power to influence them from the inside out. You stop fighting against their ego and start navigating it. The secret weapon of the sovereign in Law 2 is tactical empathy. In the common world, empathy is viewed as a soft emotion, a feeling of kindness or pity. In the arena of power, empathy is a high-resolution radar. It is the ability to step out of your own internal monologue and inhabit the mind frame of another person. Most people never truly listen. They are just waiting for their turn to speak, rehearsing their next sentence while their counterpart is still talking. This is a catastrophic status leak. The sovereign practices deep observation. You look at the micro-expressions, the posture, and the specific words people use to describe themselves. You are looking for their prime narrative, the story they tell themselves to feel important. Once you identify this narrative, you hold the remote control to their behavior. You don't persuade people with your logic, you persuade them by validating their self-image. This leads us to the protocol of the mirror. Human beings are biologically hardwired to like people who are similar to them. When you mirror the energy, the tempo, and the values of another person, you are sending a subconscious signal to their limbic system that says, "I am safe, I am like you, I validate you." This is not faking, it is strategic adaptation. By feeding their narcissism, you lower their cortisol defenses. They become open, relaxed, and more likely to follow your lead. You are effectively greasing the wheels of the interaction. While the amateur is busy trying to look cool or impressive, the sovereign is busy making the other person feel impressive. By doing this, you become the most magnetic object in the room, not because of what you say about yourself, but because of how you make others feel about themselves. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of internal validation. The reason most people are weak is that their self-worth is outsourced. They need the like, the view, and the nod of approval to feel real. This makes them easy to manipulate. If I can provide you with validation, I own you. If I can threaten to take it away, I govern you. The sovereign, however, practices self-sourcing. You build your self-image on your own competence, your own discipline, and your own sovereign frequency. Because you don't need their validation, you are the only one in the room who is truly free. You can provide validation to others as a tactical gift without ever becoming addicted to receiving it yourself. This validation asymmetry is where your power resides. You are the provider, and the provider always holds the higher status. We must also recognize the toxic narcissist's signature. To protect your empire, you must be able to spot the deep narcissist before they penetrate your inner circle. They often present themselves as ultra-charming or extraordinarily vulnerable in the beginning. They mirror you perfectly to draw you in, but eventually the mask slips. You will notice that they never ask deep questions about you. They turn every conversation back to their own achievements or their own suffering. They have no empathy reciprocity. When you encounter these individuals, do not try to change them or save them. You cannot cure a biological pattern. Your only move is to amputate. These people are the ultimate infection discussed in Law 10. By recognizing the law of narcissism, you gain the sovereign immune system to keep your grid clean of parasites. To truly integrate Law 2, you must practice the empathy audit in every interaction. Ask yourself, what is this person's secret insecurity? What do they want the world to believe about them? How can I feed that belief to get what I need? This sounds clinical because it is. You're moving from a state of reactive socializing to a state of strategic engineering. You realize that people's anger, their arrogance, and their coldness are almost always defensive maneuvers designed to protect a fragile ego. When you see this, you stop taking things personally. You become the calm scientist observing the irrational lab rat. Their attacks no longer hit you because you realize they aren't even seeing you. They are only seeing the projection of their own internal chaos. Finally, you must master the art of the sovereign withdrawal. Occasionally, the most powerful way to feed someone's narcissism is to give them a taste of your validation and then suddenly, subtly withdraw it. This creates an attention vacuum. Because they have become addicted to your gaze, they will work harder to regain your approval. You have turned your attention into a sovereign currency. You don't spend it freely, you invest it where it yields the highest return. You have mastered the second law when you can walk into a room, identify the gravity center of every ego present, and navigate the space without ever tripping a single emotional alarm. You are the ghost in the machine of human nature. Human psyche, you have moved from a state of social friction to a state of sovereign flow. The world is a sea of narcissists, all desperately looking for a mirror. Become that mirror, and you will govern the sea. You are no longer just a participant in the social grid. You are the one who determines its reflective quality. You have mastered the second law of human nature. Now that you have navigated the internal gravity of self-love and learned to use the narcissistic mirror as a tactical tool of influence, you must realize that everyone you encounter is performing. They do not show you their soul. They show you a carefully curated character. Welcome to the great theater. The third law of human nature is the principle of the social masquerade. To master the human animal, you must accept a fundamental reality of our species. Life is a theater, and every human being you encounter is an actor. From the moment we step out of our homes, we put on a social mask. We adjust our expressions, our posture, and the tone of our voice to project an image of confidence, kindness, or authority. This is not inherently evil, it is a biological necessity. Without the mask, the friction of human interaction would be unbearable. However, the common man is fooled by the mask. He takes people at their face value. He believes the forced smile, the practiced handshake, and the rehearsed speech. The sovereign, however, realizes that the truth leaks through the cracks. To dominate the grid, you must learn to ignore the words and become a master of the non-verbal frequency. You must develop the X-ray vision to see the insecure, fearful, or predatory animal hiding behind the costume. The first pillar of this law is the myth of verbal communication. We are taught to believe that words are our primary way of sharing information. This is a profound status trap. Words are the easiest thing to fake. We use language to conceal our intentions, to lie to ourselves, and to manipulate others. In reality, over 90% of human communication is non-verbal. It is written in the dilation of the pupils, the tension in the jaw, the position of the feet, and the micro-shivers of the hands. The sovereign practices the silent audit. When someone is speaking to you, you do not focus on their logic, you focus on their vibrational consistency. Does the intensity of their voice match the stillness of their body? If there is a mismatch, the words are a lie. By prioritizing the visual and the kinetic over the linguistic, you are accessing the raw data of the human psyche before it can be filtered by the lying mind. To master Law 3, you must understand the mechanics of the impression.
People are obsessed with impression management. They want to look more successful, more relaxed, or more powerful than they actually are. This effort creates visual friction. When someone is trying too hard to look confident, their movements become stiff. Their voice loses its natural resonance, and they often maintain eye contact for a few seconds too long, a biological overcompensation. The sovereign identifies these anxiety leaks and realizes that the person is in a state of status panic. You do not point this out. You simply record it. You now know their internal breaking point. You realize that their aura of dominance is a paper shield, and you can choose the exact moment to pierce it with a single, well-placed silence. The second pillar is the art of the sovereign performance. If life is a theater, you must be its most disciplined actor. The commoner wears his mask unconsciously. His emotions often bleed through, making him transparent and easy to read. The sovereign, however, practices the disciplined mask. You choose your persona based on the tactical demand of the situation. If you need to appear approachably warm to gather information, you adjust your facial muscles and your acoustic pitch to project that frequency. If you need to appear immovably cold to end a negotiation, you settle into your sovereign stillness. This is not being fake, it is impression sovereignty. You are the director of your own image. By controlling your own nonverbal signals, you dictate how the world perceives you, ensuring that no one ever sees the real machine behind the curtain unless you choose to reveal it. A critical skill in this law is the detection of micro-expressions. These are split-second flashes of emotion that cross a person's face before their conscious mind can suppress them. A flash of contempt, a flicker of fear, or a brief spark of genuine joy. To catch these, you must practice visual saturation. You must stop looking at the person as a whole and start looking at the components. Watch the corners of the mouth. A fake smile does not reach the eyes. Watch the eyebrows. A sudden lift can signal a hidden surprise or a lie being told in real time. The sovereign realizes that these micro-expressions are the biocode of the soul. Once you see them, you cannot be lied to. You are reading the internal monologue of your rival while they think they are still presenting a polished argument. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of posture. Your body is a status broadcaster. The common man walks with the weight of his insecurities. His shoulders are hunched, his movements are frantic, and his gaze is darting. This is the signal of the prey. The sovereign, instead, occupies space with heavy presence. Your movements are slow, deliberate, and cortisol-free. You do not fidget. Fidgeting is a leak of nervous energy. It tells the hierarchy that you are uncomfortable in your own skin. By maintaining acoustic and physical stillness, you project an image of absolute certainty. People are naturally drawn to this solid object in a room of liquid people. Your posture becomes your primary weapon of influence, establishing your status before you even open your mouth. We must also recognize the toxic actor's signature. There are individuals who are naturally gifted at role-playing, the charming sociopath or the professional victim. These people use the mask of extreme sincerity to bypass your defenses. The sovereign looks for pattern breaks. No one can maintain a perfect performance forever. Watch how they treat someone of lower status, a waiter, a subordinate, or a stranger. Watch how they react when they are tired, hungry, or under sudden pressure. The mask of kindness will slip for a microsecond, revealing the predatory core. The sovereign is never surprised by these revelations because he has been auditing the pattern from the beginning. You do not trust the vibe, you trust the historical consistency of the mask. To truly integrate Law 3, you must master the sovereign gaze. Most people look away when things get intense. They are uncomfortable with the visual weight of another human being. The sovereign uses the gaze as a tactical anchor. You do not stare like an aggressor, which triggers a fight or flight response. You observe with a calm, unblinking curiosity. This makes people feel transparent. Under the weight of a sovereign gaze, people begin to leak the truth. They start talking to fill the silence, they start fidgeting to release the tension, and eventually their mask begins to crumble. You are the still camera that records their disintegration. Moreover, you must understand the power of the unexpected role. Occasionally, the most effective way to dominate a grid is to break the character that people expect from you. If you are known for being cold and logical, a sudden, controlled show of warm enthusiasm will confuse your rivals and lower their guards. If you are seen as a team player, a sudden, sharp act of dominance will shock the hierarchy into submission. This is the strategic pivot. By not being a static character, you remain unpredictable, and unpredictability is the ultimate status shield. If they cannot categorize your mask, they cannot build a strategy against you. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the theater. Every social interaction is a stage. The office, the boardroom, the dinner party, these are all performative grids. The sovereign is never off duty. You are always aware of your visual output. You do not allow your internal chaos to reach the surface. You treat your body as a temple of intent. You have mastered the third law of human nature when you can walk through a sea of masked actors, seeing every lie, every insecurity, and every hidden motive, while your own mask remains an impenetrable fortress of obsidian. You are the only one in the theater who is not acting according to a script. You are the one who has seen the script. You have mastered the third law of human nature. The fourth law of human nature is the principle of character consistency. To dominate the social grid, you must accept a cold biological reality. People do not change. They may change their clothes, their locations, or their partners, but the core neural circuitry of their character remains an immovable fortress. The common man is the victim of the myth of reinvention. He believes that a person can turn over a new leaf or that a sudden change in behavior is a sign of a new identity. This is a lethal strategic error. In the arena of power, the past is the only accurate map of the future. The sovereign realizes that human beings are compulsive machines. They are biologically hardwired to repeat the same mistakes, fall for the same traps, and react to pressure in the same predictable ways. To govern your environment, you must stop looking at what people say they will do and start auditing the historical pattern of what they have always done. The first pillar of this law is the distinction between reputation and character. Reputation is the social mask we discussed in Law 3. It is the image a person carefully projects to the world. Character, however, is the deep structure formed in the first years of life, the result of early childhood attachments, genetic predispositions, and the first major challenges a person faced. Reputation is what people show you in the light. Character is what they do in the dark when they think no one is watching. The sovereign understands that character is fate. If a man has a history of betraying his partners, he will eventually betray you. If a woman has a pattern of blaming others for her failures, she will eventually blame you for hers. By auditing a person's compulsion grid, you gain the power of preemptive knowledge. You are no longer surprised by people's behavior. You are simply witnessing the inevitable unfolding of their biological script. To master Law 4, you must look for the pattern under pressure. In moments of calm, everyone can project an image of strength, patience, and loyalty. But pressure is the great auditor. When the hierarchy is stressed, when the resources are low, or when a sudden crisis hits, the social mask dissolves and the compulsive core takes control. Watch how people react to a minor setback. Do they become rigid and angry? Do they collapse into victimhood? Do they look for a scapegoat? This is their biological default. The sovereign realizes that these reactions are not one-time accidents. They are a preview of the person's future behavior in high-stakes situations. You do not wait for the big betrayal to judge someone's loyalty. You see the micro-betrayals in how they talk about their absent friends. You are looking for consistency, not potential.
The second pillar is the audit of the inner circle. Your empire is only as strong as the characters you allow into your sanctum. The commoner hires based on skill or charm. This is a catastrophic mistake. Skill can be taught, but character is immutable. A brilliant strategist with a weak character will destroy your organization from within through envy or insecurity. The sovereign, instead, hires and partners based on character strength. You look for the rock, individuals who have a history of persistence, who take absolute responsibility for their failures, and who remain calm under the cortisol storm of conflict. You realize that a person's character frequency will eventually become the frequency of your own environment. By selecting for strength, you are building an armor of integrity around your sovereignty. A critical skill in this law is identifying the compulsive types. There are specific character archetypes that are biologically designed for destruction. First, there is the hyper-perfectionist. While they seem disciplined, their obsession with detail is often a mask for a deep fear of judgment. They will become a bottleneck in your empire, paralyzing progress because of their internal insecurity. Second, there is the rebel without a cause. They hate authority because they never resolve their issues with their own father figures. They will eventually turn on you, the sovereign, simply because you represent the power they subconsciously fear. Third, there is the rescuer. They seek out the infectious unhappy, Law 10, to feel superior. They will bring parasites into your grid under the guise of helping. The sovereign identifies these compulsions early and treats them as high-risk variables.
You do not try to change these types. You simply manage them from a distance or remove them entirely from your path. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of personal character. To master others, you must first be the master of your own compulsion grid. You must perform a clinical audit of your own history. What are the mistakes you keep repeating? What are the triggers that make you lose your sovereign stillness? The common man ignores his patterns. The sovereign automates his discipline. You recognize your weaknesses and you build systems of constraint to prevent them from manifesting. If you know you are prone to impulsiveness, you create a protocol that forbids you from making a decision for 24 hours. If you know you are prone to narcissism, you force yourself to ask 10 questions for every one statement you make. You are not changing your nature, you are enclosing it in a fortress of discipline. This is the highest form of self-sovereignty. We must also understand the power of the flexible character. Most people are rigid. They have one way of responding to the world, and they stick to it even when it fails. This is a biological dead end. The sovereign, however, strives for character fluidity. While your core values remain anchored in discipline and power, your social character is adaptable. You can be the strict disciplinarian in the morning and the strategic diplomat in the afternoon. This is not inconsistency, it is strategic versatility. By not being a slave to a single compulsive response, you remain unpredictable and indigestible to your rivals. You are the only one in the grid who is not acting according to a preset script. A vital component of Law 4 is the observation of the small things. Character does not reveal itself in the grand gestures. Those are usually rehearsed performances. Character reveals itself in the trivial details. How does a person treat a waiter who makes a mistake? How do they handle a minor technical glitch? How do they react to a small loss of status in a social setting? These are the leaks of the soul. The sovereign is a collector of small data. You realize that the way a person handles the small reveals exactly how they will handle the large. By the time the high-stakes moment arrives, you have already completed your audit. You are not trusting the person, you are calculating their probability. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the historical trajectory. Every human life is a curve. If you look at the points on that curve, their past relationships, their previous jobs, their historical conflicts, you can project where the curve is going. The common man looks at the current point and hopes for a pivot. The sovereign looks at the trajectory. You do not invest in people who are on a downward curve of self-destruction, no matter how charming or talented they appear. You invest in the upward curve of consistent character. You have mastered the fourth law of human nature when you can look at a person's past and see their future as clearly as if it were written in stone. You are the only one who is not blinded by hope or potential. As we conclude this law, remember, you are the auditor. The world is a massive laboratory of compulsive behavior. By shifting your focus from what people say to what people have always done, you have gained the power of prophetic sight. You are no longer a gambler in the casino of human relationships. You are the house, and the house always knows the odds. You have moved from being a victim of surprise to being a master of inevitability. The grid is transparent to you now. You have mastered the fourth law of human nature. You have audited the rigid structure of character and learned to predict the inevitable. But power is not just about observing patterns, it is about directing desire. To govern the human animal, you must master the most painful truth of their biology. They only value what they do not have. The fifth law of human nature is the principle of psychological absence. To master the social and professional grid, you must accept a brutal biological irony. The human heart is a bottomless pit of desire, and it is most attracted to that which retreats from it. We are a species of hunters, but we have forgotten how to hunt. Instead, we have become seekers of validation. The common man makes the mistake of being too available. He believes that by showing his interest, by being helpful, and by constantly presencing himself, he will gain love or respect. This is a catastrophic status suicide. In the arena of power, familiarity breeds contempt. When you are always there, when your value is easily accessible, and when your frequency is predictable, you become a utility object. You are no longer a sovereign entity, you are a tool that is taken for granted. The sovereign, however, realizes that value is generated by scarcity. To be desired, you must learn the art of the withdrawal. You must become the absent son that the world desperately waits for. The first pillar of Law 5 is the imagination gap. Human desire is not triggered by reality, it is triggered by fantasy. When you are fully present and transparent, you leave no room for the other person's imagination to work. They see everything you are, and therefore they quickly reach the satiation point. The sovereign, instead, maintains a strategic void. You provide just enough information to fascinate, but you withhold enough to create a vacuum. The human brain is biologically hardwired to fill silence and absence with its own deepest desires.
By being elusive, you force people to project their fantasies onto you. They begin to wonder about your mysterious life, your hidden projects, and your silent intentions. You have moved from being a person to being a psychological mirror. While the amateur is busy selling himself, the sovereign is busy withdrawing, allowing the other person's narcissism to do the work of making them fall in love with your mystery. To master Law 5, you must understand the bio-sovereignty of the push-pull. Most people engage in linear pursuits. They chase what they want with transparent desperation. This triggers a repulsion response in the target. The sovereign, instead, practices the tactical retreat. You step forward, you provide a high-status signal of interest or value, and then, at the moment of peak engagement, you pull back. You become unavailable. You stop the content stream. This sudden absence creates a cortisol spike in the other person. They feel a sense of status loss because they no longer have access to you. To reclaim that status, they will begin to chase you. You have successfully flipped the gravity center of the relationship. You are no longer the hunter, you are the magnetic prize. This is the ultimate expression of the fifth law, making others come to you by using the hook of absence. The second pillar is the aura of the unattainable. Human beings are biologically programmed to want the forbidden fruit. If something is easy to get, our brains categorize it as low value. If something is difficult, restricted, or requires entrance criteria, it is immediately categorized as high status. The sovereign creates a sanctum of scarcity. You do not accept every invitation. You do not respond to every message instantly. You do not explain your no. By making your time and your presence a limited resource, you force the world to compete for it. This is the logic of the luxury brand. A diamond is just a rock, but its scarcity makes it a sovereign object. You must become the diamond in your social and professional grid. Your availability should be treated as a rare, high-value event. By doing this, you ensure that when you do appear, your presence has the weight of a global phenomenon. A critical skill in this law is the strategy of indifference. The most attractive thing you can project is a total lack of need. Most people are hungry. They need the deal. They need the partner. They need the approval. This hunger is a biological leak that signals low status. The sovereign, however, projects sovereign indifference. You look as if you could walk away from the table at any moment without a second thought. This creates an intense psychological pressure on the other party. They begin to think, why is he so calm? What does he have that I don't know about? Why doesn't he need me? Their narcissism is triggered.
To prove their own value, they will try to win you over. You have mastered Law 5 when your silence and indifference do more convincing than any argument, Law 9 of the 48 Laws. Furthermore, we must address the digital covetousness of 2026. In the age of total connectivity, everyone is streaming their lives. They are leaking their locations, their thoughts, and their status cues 24/7. This creates a saturation boredom. The sovereign instead practices digital opacity. You are a ghost on the grid. You post only the peaks, the moments of absolute excellence, and then you vanish. You do not engage in the common noise. This makes your digital presence an event. When you do broadcast intent, the world stops to listen because your signal is rare and dense. You have used the digital grid not as a place to be seen, but as a place to be missed. By withdrawing the light, you force the world to orbit the space where you used to be, waiting for your return. We must also recognize the toxic covetousness of the parasite. There are individuals who will try to use Law 5 against you, people who play games of absence to manipulate your emotions. The sovereign identifies this early. You realize that their withdrawal is a tactical maneuver, not a sign of true status. Your response is superior indifference. When they pull away, you do not lean in. You do not ask, "What's wrong?" or "Where did you go?" You simply match their absence with your own sovereign stillness. You show them that their absence has zero weight in your reality. This is a status crush. By refusing to be baited into their game, you demonstrate that your inner sanctum is self-sustaining. You have out-manipulated the manipulator by being truly unreachable. To truly integrate Law 5, you must master the art of the mystery bait. In every professional or romantic interaction, you must leave a dangling thread, a question unanswered, a project unrevealed, or a motivation unexplained. Most people explain themselves too much because they are insecure. The sovereign abbreviates the truth. You say just enough to trigger their curiosity, and then you exit the frame. This leaves them in a state of cognitive dissonance. They will spend the next few hours or days thinking about you, trying to solve the puzzle of your person. While they are thinking about you, you are effectively submitting to your frequency. You are occupying their psychological real estate for free, simply by refusing to be fully understood. Moreover, you must understand the power of the forbidden no. When you tell someone no, especially someone who is used to getting their way, you are triggering their primal law of covetousness. Suddenly, the thing you denied them becomes the most important thing in their world. The sovereign uses no as a value creation tool. You don't say no to be mean, you say no to establish your high-status borders. When you finally say yes, it is received as a trophy. By controlling the access to your reality, you ensure that every interaction you have is on your terms. You are not a service provider. You are a sovereign destination. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the unattainable sun. The sun is the most powerful object in our solar system, not because it touches the Earth, but because it maintains a sovereign distance. It provides life-giving light, but if you get too close, it burns you. It is always there, but it is unreachable. This is the solar frequency you must adopt. You are warm and radiant when you are present, but you maintain the gravitational gap. You never allow anyone to own your time or your attention completely. You have mastered the fifth law of human nature when you realize that the most powerful thing you can do for your reputation is to vanish. As we conclude this law, look at your current relationships and professional grids. Where are you being too available? Where are you leaking status by being too helpful or too transparent? The sovereign realizes that desire is a child of absence. Master the fifth law, and you ensure that the world is always in a state of hunger for your presence. You have moved from being a seeker of attention to being an object of worship. The grid is waiting for your return. You have mastered the fifth law of human nature. The sixth law of human nature is the principle of temporal blindness. To master the grid of power and human affairs, you must accept a profound biological limitation. The human brain is not designed to see the future. It is designed to react to the immediate present.
Our ancestors survived by responding to the rustle in the grass or the sudden change in the weather. This nearsightedness is hardwired into our limbic system. The common man is a slave to the tactical fog. He is perpetually distracted by the latest news cycle, the immediate crisis in his office, or the temporary fluctuations of his social status. He reacts with intensity to things that will not matter in 6 months while ignoring the slow-moving glaciers of fate that will destroy him in 6 years. The sovereign, however, realizes that perspective is the ultimate weapon. To dominate, you must pull your gaze away from the noise of the now and develop a long-term frequency. You must learn to see the patterns that emerge only when you step back from the immediate fray. The first pillar of this law is the myth of the urgent. Most people live in a state of reactive exhaustion. They spend their energy putting out fires that they themselves started through a lack of foresight. This creates a status leak. The more you react to the present, the less control you have over the future. The commoner believes that being busy is a sign of importance. In reality, being busy is a sign of being governed by the environment. The sovereign practices strategic detachment. You do not allow the crises of others to dictate your tempo. You realize that most emergencies are merely the result of other people's irrationality and short-sightedness. By refusing to enter their reactive loop, you maintain your sovereign stillness. You are the only one in the room who is looking at the macro trajectory, while everyone else is blinded by the micro incident. This vision gap is where your authority is born. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of the time horizon. The status of an individual is directly proportional to the length of their time horizon. The low-status individual thinks in terms of hours and days. He wants immediate gratification, immediate feedback, and immediate relief. The middle-class mind thinks in terms of months and years. But the sovereign mind thinks in terms of decades and generations. When you extend your time horizon, your current problems lose their emotional gravity. A setback that feels like a catastrophe on a Tuesday becomes a minor data point when viewed from the perspective of a 10-year plan. This perspective shift lowers your cortisol and elevates your decision-making. You stop making tactical moves and start making generational investments. You are playing a different game than the masses, and because your game is longer, you are essentially invisible to their limited radar. To master Law 6, you must also recognize the lethality of the trend trap. Humanity is biologically prone to herding behavior. When a new trend, a new ideology, or a new market bubble appears, the masses rush toward it with short-sighted greed. They believe the current direction will continue forever. The sovereign, however, practices historical recalibration. You realize that everything in human nature moves in cycles. What goes up with irrational intensity must eventually undergo a correction. Instead of joining the herd, you watch the herd from a high-status distance. You identify the inflection points before they happen because you have studied the historical patterns of human short-sightedness. While the masses are losing their fortunes and their reputations in the collapse of the trend, you are positioned to harvest the value they leave behind.
You are the patient predator who knows that time is the ultimate auditor of truth. The second pillar of this law is the architecture of the big picture. In every professional or social grid, there are undercurrents that are moving beneath the surface of daily interactions. Most people are too busy looking at the waves, the arguments, the small wins, the gossip, to notice the tide. The sovereign focuses on the global context. You ask yourself, if this current pattern continues for 5 years, where will it lead? What is the inevitable consequence of this person's compulsive behavior? What is the structural weakness in this organization that no one is talking about? By answering these questions, you gain the power of predictive sovereignty. You are not guessing the future. You are calculating the only logical outcome of current irrationality. This allows you to position yourself at the goal before the rest of the world even realizes where the ball is going. We must also master the protocol of strategic patience. The common man is high impulse. He cannot wait. His lack of patience is a biological vulnerability that can be exploited. The sovereign, instead, uses time as a force multiplier. You realize that sometimes the most powerful move is to do absolutely nothing. You allow your rivals to exhaust themselves in their short-sighted battles. You allow the infectious unhappy to self-destruct through their own patterns. You wait for the emotional storm to pass so you can act with clinical precision. This patience is not passive, it is an aggressive stillness. By owning your time, you own the environment. People will eventually come to you because you are the only stable object in their chaotic, short-sighted world. Moreover, you must understand the sovereignty of the objective. Most people lose their way because they get distracted by side quests, petty grievances, the need to be right in an argument, or the desire for a small, immediate status boost. This is the gravity of the trivial. The sovereign maintains a laser focus on the primary objective. You are willing to lose the small battle to win the decade. You are willing to look weak in the present to be invincible in the future. You do not explain your moves to the short-sighted because they lack the vision frequency to understand them. You have mastered Law 6 when you can walk through a room of people who are panicking about the now and feel a deep internal calm because you are already living in the next. A vital component of this mastery is the audit of the daily routine. Most people's lives are a collection of short-sighted habits that are leading them toward a cliff. They eat for immediate pleasure, they work for immediate paychecks, and they socialize for immediate validation. The sovereign engineers the compound effect. You realize that small, disciplined actions repeated over a long time horizon create an explosion of power. You do not seek the giant leap, you seek the inevitable drift toward greatness. You are building an empire, one sovereign hour at a time. By the time the masses realize you have ascended, it is too late for them to catch up. Your lead is not measured in effort, but in the duration of your focus. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the historical legacy. The common man wants to be remembered for what he did today. The sovereign wants to build a manifesto of existence. You look at your life as a single, coherent narrative. Every decision you make is a sentence in that story. This legacy perspective prevents you from making small, cowardly, or short-sighted moves that would stain the overall work. You are the author of your life, not a character in it. You have mastered the sixth law of human nature when you can look at the chaos of the present and see it for what it truly is, a temporary flicker in the grand, long-term architecture of your sovereignty. You are the only one who sees the end of the movie while the rest are still arguing about the opening scene. As we conclude this law, realize that your greatest enemy is the urgency of the unimportant. By shifting your focus from the now to the inevitable, you have gained a tactical distance that makes you untouchable. You have moved from a state of reactive survival to a state of proactive dominion. But as you elevate your vision, you must also prepare for the friction that your ascent will cause in others. To truly lead, you must learn to navigate the invisible walls that people build around their own spirits to protect their egos from your light. The journey from the big picture to the internal fortress of others is the next step in your evolution, as we move from the clarity of time to the subtle softening of the human defenses that stand in your way. The seventh law of human nature is the principle of psychological softening. To navigate the social grid with absolute sovereignty, you must accept a fundamental barrier. Every human being you encounter lives inside an internal fortress. They are surrounded by invisible walls of defensiveness designed to protect their ego from change, criticism, and the influence of others. The common man makes the mistake of direct siege. He attempts to persuade through logic. He points out flaws in others' thinking, and he demands change through sheer willpower or argument. This is a catastrophic tactical error. When you attack a person's ideas or behavior directly, you trigger their biological resistance. Their gates close, their defenses stiffen, and you become an enemy to be defeated rather than a leader to be followed. The sovereign, however, practices psychological aikido. You do not fight their resistance, you use it. You realize that the only way to lower a person's guard is to validate their self-opinion. You must make them feel that by following you, they are actually following their own best instincts. The first pillar of this law is the concept of the self-opinion. Every person holds a triad of beliefs about themselves that they will defend unto death. They believe they are autonomous, acting of their own free will. They believe they are intelligent in their own unique way, and they believe they are good and decent. This is the holy trinity of the human ego. When you suggest that someone is being controlled, that they are making a stupid mistake, or that they are being selfish, you are launching a nuclear strike against their self-opinion. The result is immediate and total defensive retrenchment. The sovereign, however, practices psychological aikido. You do not fight their resistance, you use it. You realize that the only way to lower a person's guard is to validate their self-opinion. You must make them feel that by following you, they are actually following their own best instincts. The first pillar of this law is the concept of the self-opinion. Every person holds a triad of beliefs about themselves that they will defend unto death. They believe they are autonomous, acting of their own free will. They believe they are intelligent in their own unique way, and they believe they are good and decent. This is the holy trinity of the human ego. In this relaxed state, they become malleable. You are not forcing them to change, you are inviting them to expand their own self-image to include your objectives. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of non-resistance. Most people are high-friction communicators. They push, they interrupt, and they dominate the conversation with their own needs. This creates a status clash that makes influence impossible. The sovereign, instead, practices the path of least resistance. You adopt a posture of yielding authority. You listen more than you speak. You ask questions that allow the other person to feel like the expert. This is a tactical gift. By granting them a temporary feeling of superiority, you are gathering the raw material of their insecurities and desires. You realize that validation is a low-cost, high-return currency. When you validate a person's autonomy, they no longer feel the need to fight you to prove their independence. They become your strategic partner because you are the only person who makes them feel like the sovereign of their own life. This is the ultimate status flip. You are the one in control precisely because you do not look like you are trying to control. To master Law 7, you must recognize the lethality of the moral high ground. The commoner loves to lecture and judge. It gives them a temporary dopamine hit of moral superiority. But in the architecture of power, judgment is a resource drain. When you judge someone, you lose the ability to influence them. The sovereign adopts a clinical neutrality. You do not care if people are right or wrong. You only care if they are useful or obstructive. If someone is being difficult, you do not meet their heat with your own. You soften the interaction by finding a point of agreement, no matter how small. You use the yes and technique to redirect their energy. By aligning yourself with their current momentum, you gain the leasing rights to their mind. You are the soft water that eventually wears down the hard rock of their resistance. The second pillar of this law is the architecture of the strategic favor. Human beings are biologically hardwired for reciprocity. When you do something for someone, especially something that validates their self-opinion or solves a private problem, you create a psychological debt. But the sovereign does not perform obvious favors that make the other person feel inferior or obligated in a heavy-handed way. That would trigger their autonomy defense. Instead, you perform invisible favors. You give them credit for an idea that was actually yours. You accidentally solve a problem and let them take the win. You make your assistants feel like a natural alignment of interests. Because they don't feel indebted in a humiliating way, their defenses remain low. They begin to associate your presence with their own success and dopamine surges. You have become a habit in their lives, and habits are the hardest things to break. Moreover, we must master the protocol of mirrored motivation. People are only moved by what they think is their own desire. The commoner tries to motivate others by talking about his goals and his vision. This is a narcissistic leak. The sovereign, instead, performs an incentive audit. You look at the other person's compulsive patterns, Law 4, and their narcissistic center, Law 2, and you frame your request so that it perfectly matches their self-interest. You don't ask for help, you offer an opportunity for them to prove their intelligence or their nobility. You use their internal language. If they value freedom, you show them how your plan gives them more autonomy. If they value status, you show them how it elevates their reputation. By becoming a mirror for their own goals, you eliminate the friction of persuasion. You aren't pushing them, they are running toward the goal you set, thinking they are chasing their own dream. We must also understand the sovereignty of the subtle suggestion. Direct commands are for subordinates, suggestions are for sovereign allies. The commoner is too blunt, he says, "Do this." The sovereign uses incentive language. You plant a seed of an idea in a casual conversation, then you let it grow in the other person's mind. You wait for them to discover the idea themselves. When they come back to you with their new plan, you congratulate them on their brilliance. This is the master move of Law 7. You have achieved your objective while making the other person feel more powerful and autonomous than ever. You have traded the ego credit for the actual result. The amateur wants the credit. The sovereign wants the throne of reality. A vital component of this mastery is the resistance audit. Before you enter any negotiation or high-stakes interaction, you must ask, what is this person's primary defensive wall? Are they afraid of looking weak? Are they obsessed with being seen as kind? Are they terrified of losing control? Once you identify the gatekeeper of their fortress, you don't attack it, you bribe it. You provide the exact validation that wall was designed to protect. If they fear looking weak, you constantly refer to their strength. If they fear losing control, you give them the illusion of choice, offering them two options that both lead to your desired outcome. By feeding the gatekeeper, you gain entry to the inner sanctum of their decision-making process. You are the only person who is not fighting them, which makes you the only person they trust. Furthermore, we must internalize the physics of the social lubricant. In the age of digital aggression and cancel culture, everyone is on high alert. People are hyper-defensive. The sovereign uses humility as a tactical mask. You are willing to admit small, irrelevant flaws in yourself to prove your honesty and relatability. This strategic vulnerability makes others feel safe. They think, if he is this honest about his small mistakes, he must be trustworthy. This lowers their biological radar. Once the radar is down, you can move with inevitable intent. You are the Trojan horse of human nature, charming, humble, and non-threatening on the outside, but carrying a full battalion of strategy on the inside. Finally, we must realize that the ultimate form of Law 7 is self-softening. You cannot influence the world if you are trapped in your own fortress of defensiveness. You must perform a clinical audit of your own self-opinion. Are you too attached to being right? Are you too sensitive to criticism? The sovereign practices ego fluidity. You are willing to be wrong today, to be invincible tomorrow. You treat your own ego as a tactical tool, not a sacred object. By softening your own internal walls, you gain the vibrational clarity to see the walls in others. You have mastered the seventh law of human nature when you can walk through a field of thorns without being scratched and enter a city of enemies and leave with their keys. You are the only one who is not fighting the current of human ego. You are the one who is steering the river. As we conclude this law, look at your current conflicts. Stop pushing. Stop arguing. Stop trying to win the conversation. Instead, start validating the fortress. Shift your focus from what I want to how they want to be seen. The sovereign realizes that influence is the art of the soft touch. Master the seventh law, and you ensure that the world opens its gates to you without a single shot being fired. You have moved from a state of social friction to a state of sovereign infiltration. But as you master the art of moving others, you must also master the lens through which you see the world, ensuring that your own internal perspective is not the very thing sabotaging your ascent to the throne. The eighth law of human nature is the principle of perceptual coloring. To reach the summit of sovereignty, you must accept a metaphysical truth. The world is not a fixed, objective reality. It is a reflection of the lens through which you view it. Most people walk through life as victims of their own attitude, unaware that their internal state is actively creating the external obstacles they complain about. The common man possesses a constricted attitude. He is defensive, suspicious, and perpetually looking for reasons to feel slighted or limited. This internal frequency of lack acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because he expects hostility, he acts in a way that triggers hostility in others, thereby confirming his original bias. The sovereign, however, realizes that attitude is a strategic choice. You do not wait for the world to be kind to you. You engineer an expansive attitude that forces the world to provide you with opportunities. You realize that your mental frame is the primary architect of your social and professional destiny. The first pillar of this law is the myth of objective circumstances. Most people believe that their attitude is a result of their environment. They are unhappy because they have a bad boss, or they are cynical because they were betrayed. This is a slave perspective. The sovereign understands that the environment is actually a result of the internal baseline. Your brain is a filter machine. If your attitude is one of status paranoia, you will interpret a neutral comment as a lethal insult. This triggers a cortisol leak in your body, which alters your nonverbal signals, making you look weak or aggressive to the hierarchy. The hierarchy, in turn, reacts to these signals by isolating or attacking you. You have sabotaged yourself before the game even began. To master Law 8, you must perform a cognitive recalibration. You must move from a hostile frame to an expansive frame. You stop seeing people as threats and start seeing them as data points or potential assets. This shift in frequency immediately alters how the world responds to your presence. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Human nature is biologically designed to seek consistency. If you believe that you are destined for greatness, your brain will prioritize information that leads you to greatness. You will see hidden doors that others miss. If you believe you are a victim of a rigged system, your brain will shut down your creative centers to protect you from the pain of failure. This is the internal saboteur. The commoner is his own worst enemy because he is constantly broadcasting his own limitations. The sovereign, instead, adopts an aggressive optimism. This is not wishful thinking, it is a tactical tool. By maintaining a high-status internal state, you project an aura of inevitable success. This aura attracts allies, intimidates rivals, and creates a gravitational pull toward your objectives. You have realized that luck is often just the biological byproduct of an expansive attitude that is open to the chaotic flow of reality. The second pillar of this law is the architecture of the 5 attitudes. To dominate Law 8, you must identify and neutralize the 5 constricted attitudes that lead to self-destruction. First, there is the hostile attitude. This person sees life as a battlefield where everyone is out to get them. They create the very enemies they fear. Second, there is the anxious attitude. This person is so terrified of making a mistake that they become paralyzed, leaking their insecurity to the hierarchy and inviting status attacks. Third, there is the avoidant attitude. This person hides from challenges, living in a golden cage of comfort that eventually becomes their tomb. Fourth, there is the depressive attitude. They see everything as meaningless, draining the energy of everyone around them. Fifth, there is the resentful attitude. They feel the world owes them something, which makes them repulsive to the successful. The sovereign performs a clinical audit of his own soul. You identify which of these filters is clouding your vision, and you amputate it through a relentless commitment to strategic expansion. To truly integrate Law 8, you must develop the protocol of the amoral perspective. The common man is obsessed with should. People should be honest. The world should be fair. When reality does not match their should, they fall into a constricted trap of anger and resentment. This is a massive energy leak. The sovereign, instead, practices the amoral observation. You accept the world as it is, irrational, chaotic, and governed by human nature. You do not judge the storm, you learn how to sail. By removing the moral filter, you gain the clarity to see the logic of power in any situation. This makes you indigestible to the emotional drama of the masses. You are the only one in the room who is not complaining about the rules. You are the only one who is busy using the rules to win. Moreover, we must master the sovereignty of resilience. In the architecture of an expansive attitude, a failure is merely a feedback loop. Most people take failure personally. It wounds their self-opinion, Law 7, and makes them withdraw. The sovereign, however, treats every setback as a biological stress test. You use the friction of reality to strengthen your internal core. You do not rebound from a loss, you transmute it into a new strategic direction. This is the alchemy of the sovereign mind. Because your attitude is expansive, you see the lesson where others see the end. This makes you untouchable in the social grid. No one can defeat a man who views every attack as a form of training. You have moved from being a recipient of fate to being a distiller of fortune. A vital component of this mastery is the audit of the social circle. Your attitude is not just internal, it is infectious. As we discussed in Law 10 of the 48 Laws, staying near the unlucky and unhappy will stain your own lens. The sovereign understands that frequency alignment is real. If you surround yourself with constricted, defensive, and fearful people, their bio-vibration will eventually lower your own. You must curate your environment to include only those with an expansive trajectory. You seek out those who view the world as a map of possibilities rather than a grid of limitations. By aligning your frequency with the elite, you ensure that your attitude remains a sharp blade rather than a dull shield. You are the warden of your own internal atmosphere. Furthermore, we must internalize the physics of the expansive gaze. When you walk into a room, your gaze should be wide, curious, and non-judgmental. This is the visual signal of sovereignty. The constricted person has a narrow, darting gaze, looking for threats. The expansive person has a soft, open vision. This signal tells the hierarchy that you are comfortable with yourself and the world. It invites people to reveal themselves to you. Because you are not pushing with a hostile attitude, the fortresses, Law 7, of others naturally soften in your presence. You have become a psychological oasis in a desert of defensive egos. This is the ultimate soft power. By mastering your own lens, you have gained the power to color the reality of everyone around you. Finally, we must realize that the ultimate form of Law 8 is the manifestation of intent. When your attitude is perfectly aligned with your primary objective, Law 6, you become a solid object of intent. The world begins to bend to your expectations. This is not magic. It is the natural result of high-frequency consistency. Because you are not wasting energy on self-sabotage, resentment, or fear, 100% of your internal resources are focused on the throne. You have mastered the 8th law of human nature when you can look at the darkest, most chaotic situation and see the golden path to victory. You are the only one who is not blinded by the shadows of your own making. You have become the architect of your own light. While you master the lens of your own attitude, you must realize that beneath the surface of every human being lies a hidden chamber, a place where the desires and impulses they find unacceptable are stored in darkness. To truly dominate the social grid, you must now move from the light of your attitude to the darkness of the human shadow, learning to see the monsters that people hide, even from themselves. The 9th law of human nature is the principle of the dark double. To achieve absolute dominance over the social grid, you must accept a disturbing biological reality. Every human being you encounter is a walking contradiction. There is the social persona, the polite, controlled, and virtuous mask that people present to the world, and then there is the shadow. The shadow is the collection of all the impulses, desires, and traits that a person has deemed unacceptable since childhood. It is the repository of their secret aggressions, their hidden narcissism, and their primitive lust for power. The common man is a slave to his shadow because he denies its existence. He believes his own virtue mask is the truth. Because he represses these dark forces, they eventually burst out in compulsive leaks or sudden destructive acts that sabotage his life and reputation. The sovereign, however, realizes that the shadow is the source of power. You do not hide from your darkness, you perform a clinical audit of it. You learn to see the monsters in others, and more importantly, you learn to harness your own demon to create a formidable and impenetrable presence. The first pillar of this law is the architecture of the persona. From the moment we are socialized, we are taught to fit in. We learn that being angry, being selfish, or being overtly ambitious is bad. To survive in the tribe, we build a persona, a light side that is designed to be liked and approved of. But energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be displaced. The more perfect and kind a person appears on the surface, the darker and more repressed their shadow becomes. The sovereign understands that extreme virtue is a status warning. When someone overemphasizes their morality, their humility, or their selflessness, they are overcompensating for a shadow that is dangerously close to the surface. You do not trust the saintly mask. You look for the vibrational discord, the moments where the person's eyes don't match their smile, or where their kindness feels like a calculated move. By identifying the gap between the persona and the shadow, you gain the power to see the raw human animal while everyone else is distracted by the costume. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of the shadow leak. No one can maintain a persona 100% of the time. The shadow is a high-pressure system constantly looking for a crack in the fortress. These cracks appear in the form of microaggressions, passive-aggressive comments, or sudden outbursts that are later blamed on stress or fatigue. The commoner ignores these leaks. The sovereign audits the leak. When a rival makes a joke at your expense and then claims they were just kidding, you have just witnessed a direct signal from their shadow. They secretly resent you, and their shadow found a socially acceptable way to strike. You do not react with anger, you react with clinical satisfaction. You now know where their hidden blade is located. By recording these patterns, you can predict exactly when and how they will betray you. You are the only one who knows the real person behind the curtains of their social performance. The second pillar of this law is the mastery of your own shadow. To be a sovereign, you must stop repressing your dark traits and start integrating them. The common man fears his own aggression and ambition, so he becomes weak and nice. This makes him a victim of the grid. The sovereign realizes that your dark side contains the raw energy required for dominance, creativity, and resilience. You do not let the shadow drive the car, but you put the shadow in the engine. This is the shadow integration protocol. You acknowledge your desire for status, your capacity for cold calculation, and your inherent aggression. By owning these traits, you prevent them from leaking out in self-sabotaging ways. Instead, they manifest as controlled intensity. When you walk into a room, people feel a weight to your presence. They sense that beneath your polite mask, there is a solid object of power that is not to be trifled with. You have transformed your darkness into a gravitational force. To master Law 9, you must also recognize the lethality of projection. The common man is a projecting machine. Because he cannot face his own shadow, he projects his dark traits onto others. The person who is constantly accusing others of being greedy is often the one struggling with their own repressed greed. The person who is obsessed with finding traitors is often the one with a shadow that is prone to betrayal. The sovereign practices projective neutrality. When someone attacks you with intense moral outrage, you do not take it personally. You realize that they are not talking to you, they are talking to the part of themselves they hate. This realization gives you an emotional shield. You can remain calm and still under fire because you see that the fire is merely a symptom of your rival's internal conflict. You use their projections as a diagnostic tool to understand their structural weaknesses. Moreover, we must master the sovereignty of the dark persona. In the arena of power, a persona that is too clean is a weakness. It makes you look predictable and easily manipulated. The sovereign adds a touch of shadow to his public image. You project a sense of unpredictable depth. You are polite, but you are not nice. You are collaborative, but people sense your clinical detachment. This shadow aura creates a sense of primal authority. People are naturally more respectful of a leader who they believe has a dark room they haven't seen. This is the acoustic of power. By not revealing the full extent of your soul, you force others to fill the silence with their own fears and fantasies. You become a psychological sphinx. While the masses are leaking their souls through constant transparency, you remain an inscrutable fortress. A vital component of this mastery is the shadow harnessing of creativity. Most people's work is dull because it is filtered through their safe persona. The sovereign allows the shadow to inform his work. You use your secret angers to fuel your focus. You use your predatory instincts to identify market gaps and rival weaknesses. You are not evil, you are complete. A man who is only light is a half-man, easily broken by the storms of reality. A man who has integrated his shadow is a complete sovereign. He can be a diplomat when necessary and a warrior when required. This behavioral versatility is the ultimate status signal. It tells the hierarchy that you are not governed by social rules, but by your own internal manifesto. You have moved from a state of repressed conformity to a state of integrated dominion. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of the truth-telling mirror. The sovereign seeks out truth mirrors, individuals who are not blinded by his persona and can help him see his own shadow leaks. In your empire, you must have at least one person who is allowed to tell you when your ego is hijacking your strategy. This prevents the shadow blindness that has destroyed historical kings and modern CEOs. By being aware of your own dark double, you ensure that your moves remain calculated rather than compulsive. You have mastered the ninth law when you can look at your own reflection and see the apex predator staring back, and instead of being afraid, you feel a deep internal alignment. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are a unified machine moving toward the throne. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the shadow grid. Every social interaction is a meeting of shadows. Beneath the polite dinner conversation or the professional meeting, there is a shadow war happening. People are subtly trying to establish dominance, siphoning attention, and protecting their fragile personas. The sovereign is the only one who is consciously present in this shadow war. You look at the subtext, not the text. You hear the frequency behind the words. You realize that when people are at their most rational, their shadows are often doing the most work. By mastering the ninth law, you have gained the night vision of the soul. You see in the dark what others can only see in the light. You are the architect of the invisible, governing the forces that the common man is too afraid to even acknowledge. As we conclude this law, look at your own virtue mask. What are you hiding? What traits do you judge most harshly in others? The sovereign realizes that your shadow is your greatest untapped resource. Master the ninth law, and you ensure that your darkness serves your light, creating an authority that is as deep as it is powerful. You have moved from a state of repressed conformity to a state of integrated dominion. But as you integrate your own darkness and see it in others, you will encounter the most destructive and ancient shadow frequency in human nature, a frequency that can turn brothers into enemies and empires into ash. To truly protect your throne, you must now prepare for the silent, burning gaze of envy that your success will inevitably attract. The 10th law of human nature is the principle of the silent poisoner. To secure your throne and maintain your sovereignty, you must accept a dark, biological reality. Your success is a threat to the self-esteem of everyone around you. Envy is the most hidden, most denied, and most dangerous of all human emotions. It is a status pain, triggered by the realization that someone else possesses the qualities, the resources, or the trajectory that we lack. The common man is a slave to this burning gaze. He achieves a small victory and broadcasts it with transparent arrogance, unaware that he is status leaking and inviting a swarm of secret enemies to dismantle his life. He mistakes praise for support, failing to see the cold fire of resentment behind the smiles of his peers. The sovereign, however, realizes that success requires a shadow. You do not show the full extent of your power to those who cannot replicate it. You learn to deflect the gaze, to downplay your brilliance, and to hide your crown behind a mask of relatability. You realize that to be envied is a sign of status, but to be destructively envied is a sign of poor strategic management. The first pillar of this law is the biology of social comparison. We are a species of primates hardwired for hierarchy. We are constantly scanning the grid to see where we stand relative to our peers. When you rise above the average, you disrupt the status equilibrium of the group. Your existence becomes a mirror that reflects the mediocrity of others. This creates an intense, cortisol spike in their nervous system. Because humans cannot bear the feeling of being inferior, their brains immediately look for a way to level the field. This is the pull-down reflex. They will look for your flaws, they will gossip about your luck, and they will subtly sabotage your projects to prove that you are not actually better than them. The sovereign understands that envy is a biomechanical response. You do not take it personally, you treat it as a status signal. When you feel the coldness in a friend's voice or see the backhanded compliment in a colleague's eyes, you recognize that you have triggered their social insecurity. Instead of reacting with pride, you react with strategic humility. You provide them with a dopamine siphon of validation to lower their internal tension and keep their shadow monsters at bay. Furthermore, we must address the masks of the envious. Envy almost never shows its true face because it is a low-status emotion to admit. It disguises itself as moral outrage, concern for fairness, or constructive criticism. The commoner is fooled by these masks. He engages in arguments about justice with people who are actually just jealous of his wealth or his influence. The sovereign, however, performs a frequency audit. You look at the intensity of the attack compared to the size of the mistake. If someone is attacking you with disproportionate heat for a minor error, they are not upset about the error, they are using it as an opening for their repressed envy to escape. You also look for excessive praise. People who worship you too quickly often have the most fragile egos. They are setting you up for a fall because their self-worth is tied to your proximity. When you fail to satisfy their narcissism, their worship turns into a lethal resentment. By identifying these masks early, you maintain your sovereign distance, ensuring that your inner circle remains free of silent poisoners who would burn your empire just to warm themselves by the fire. The second pillar of this law is the strategy of the shared crown. To dominate without triggering a revolt, you must make your success feel inclusive. The common man hoards the credit. He wants everyone to know he is the lone genius. This is a tactical suicide. The sovereign, instead, practices credit redistribution. When you achieve a massive victory, you publicly attribute it to the guidance of your mentors, the hard work of your team, or even a stroke of luck. By attributing your success to external factors, you lower the status friction in the room. You make others feel that by being near you, they are also winning. You turn your rivals into beneficiaries of your power. This is the master move of Law 10. You are the one holding the actual resources and authority, but you allow others to hold the status validation. By making your throne look like a rising tide that lifts all boats, you eliminate the need for sabotage. People will protect your empire because they believe their own self-image is tied to its survival. To master Law 10, you must also recognize the lethality of the sudden ascent. Nothing triggers envy faster than a rapid rise in status. If you move from the basement to the penthouse overnight, you have violated the social gravity of those you left behind. They will never forgive you for proving that the system is permeable. The sovereign, instead, practices the illusion of gradualism. Even if your rise is rapid, you project a narrative of struggle. You talk about your failures, your sleepless nights, and the high price you paid for your position. This vulnerability aura makes your success seem earned rather than gifted. People can tolerate a winner if they believe the winner has suffered. By sharing your scars, you make your trophy less offensive to the mediocre. You are using strategic victimhood as a shield to protect your actual dominance. You have mastered the art of being unstoppable while appearing relatable. Furthermore, we must master the protocol of the sovereign withdrawal. As we discussed in Law 5, absence creates value. In the context of Law 10, absence also cools the envy. If you are constantly in the faces of your peers displaying your wealth, your intellect, or your happiness, you are infecting them with envy 24/7. The sovereign knows when to vanish into the shadow. You take periods of isolation where you build your power in silence. You do not post every win on the digital grid. You allow the world to forget the intensity of your light, so that when you return, it is seen as a boon rather than a threat. This periodic invisibility prevents the envy pressure from reaching a boiling point. You are the ghost emperor who governs from a distance, ensuring that your presence remains a sacred event rather than a daily irritation. A vital component of this mastery is the audit of the mirror group. Your greatest threat of envy comes from those most similar to you, your siblings, your old classmates, and your direct professional rivals. This is because similarity breeds comparison. You do not envy a king in a far-off land. You envy the neighbor who just bought a better car. The sovereign understands this proximity vulnerability. When you are with your mirror group, you perform a status downshift. You dress down, you listen more, and you focus on their achievements. You act as if your life is complicated and difficult. This protective coloring allows you to maintain your old connections without triggering a biological coup. You are moving through the world with silent feet, ensuring that no one hears the jingling of your gold until you are too powerful for their envy to matter. Moreover, you must understand the sovereignty of the cold amputation. Despite your best efforts to downplay your success, some individuals are chronic envy carriers. They are biologically incapable of celebrating your rise. Their narcissism is too deep, and their sense of inadequacy is too profound. With these people, there is no strategic humility that will work. The sovereign recognizes the point of no return. You do not try to fix the relationship or explain your value. You perform a clinical amputation. You remove them from your grid with acoustic silence. You don't make an enemy of them through a loud argument. You simply phase them out of your reality. You realize that a single envy parasite in your inner circle can provide the intel that leads to your total destruction. You protect your vibrational purity with a cold, unblinking discipline. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the apex presence. Ultimately, the highest form of Law 10 is to become so powerful, so disciplined, and so inevitable that envy turns into awe. When you reach a certain altitude of sovereignty, you are no longer compared to the masses. You have moved from the human scale to the monumental scale. People stop envying the sun. They simply accept its light. This is the solar frequency. To reach this state, you must be unified, Law 9, and patient, Law 6. You must endure the storm of resentment in the middle of your journey to reach the quiet peak at the end. You have mastered the 10th law of human nature when you can walk through a sea of secret enemies knowing they want to strike, but realizing they are paralyzed by the weight of your presence. You are the only one who is not fighting for status because you have become the status generator. As we conclude this clinical journey through the 10 laws of our nature, we stand at the precipice of a final realization. We have dismantled the commoner's soul, analyzed the emotional horse, mirrored the narcissist, and integrated the shadow. We have seen the patterns of short-sightedness and the walls of defensiveness. We have navigated the hunger of covetousness and the silent poison of envy. You now possess the X-ray vision to see the grid of human existence as it truly is. But knowledge without synthesis is merely information. To truly rule, you must now bring all these threads together into a single coherent manifesto of power. You are ready for the final transmission, the gathering of the laws into a single throne of reality that will define your empire forever. We have reached the final gate of the Sovereignty Archive. Over the last 2 hours, we have performed a clinical and uncompromising audit of the human machine. We have stripped away the illusions of logic, kindness, and transparency, revealing the raw biological grid that governs every social interaction, every professional hierarchy, and every internal struggle. You are no longer the person who started this journey. The commoner's soul, That part of you that craves safety, fears truth, and reacts to every emotional trigger has been dismantled. In its place, we have installed the Sovereign OS. You now possess the X-ray vision to see the patterns of the shadow where others only see the mask of the persona. You have moved from being a recipient of fate to being the architect of reality. Let us synthesize the pillars of your new empire. We began with the law of irrationality, realizing that your greatest enemy is your own emotional horse. You have learned to install the third-party observer, gaining the evaluative distance required to remain still while the world burns in a reactive fire. You then moved to the law of narcissism, transforming the universal hunger for validation into tactical empathy. You are now the mirror that others desperately seek, using their self-obsession as a backdoor to their decision-making. Through the law of role-playing, you have decoded the non-verbal frequency, seeing the insecurities and predatory instincts that leak through the cracks of the social masquerade. You have become the director of your own image, choosing your mask with clinical intent. Furthermore, you have mastered the law of compulsive behavior, realizing that character is fate. You no longer listen to what people say. You audit the historical trajectory of what they have always done. This prophetic sight has made you invincible to betrayal and surprise. By mastering the law of covetousness, you have learned the alchemy of absence. You have transformed your time and attention into a sovereign currency, creating a gravitational pull that forces the world to chase you. With the law of short-sightedness, you have pulled your gaze away from the tactical fog of the present, extending your time horizon to the macro trajectory. You are playing the long game, while your rivals exhaust themselves in the trivialities of the now. As we progressed, you learned to soften the law of defensiveness, realizing that influence is the art of the soft touch. You no longer argue, you validate the fortress of the ego in others to gain entry to their inner sanctum. Through the law of self-sabotage, you have mastered your internal lens, choosing an expansive attitude that forces reality to provide you with opportunities. You have looked into the darkness of the law of repression, integrating your own shadow to create an aura of primal authority. And finally, you have learned to navigate the law of envy, protecting your actual dominance through a shield of strategic humility and the illusion of gradualism. You have moved through the forest of human nature with silent feet, ensuring that your crown is only visible to those you choose to govern. But knowledge without integration is merely a burden. The weight of these 10 laws requires a high testosterone of character. You must now walk back into the arena and apply these principles with a cold, calculated grace. The world will not notice your transformation immediately, but they will feel your weight. They will notice that you are no longer easy to read. They will sense that your silence is heavier, your gaze is steadier, and your reactions are non-existent. You have become a solid object in a world of liquid people. This internal stillness is the ultimate status signal. It tells the hierarchy that you are no longer governed by the limbic system, but by the throne of rationality. The path of the sovereign is a lonely one, but it is a path of absolute freedom. Most people will continue to live in the shadow war, reacting to triggers, leaking status, and chasing the dopamine siphon of immediate approval. Do not pity them. Audit them. Use their irrationality as the raw material for your own objectives. Remember that every person you meet is a laboratory of human nature. Every conversation is a grid calibration. Every conflict is a stress test for your sovereignty. You are the warden of your own environment, the architect of your own reputation, and the chief chemist of your own internal state. You are the Audiobook Empire. This manifesto is not a philosophy to be discussed. It is a protocol to be executed. The throne of your own life has been empty for too long, occupied by the fears and expectations of others. Today, you occupy that throne. You take absolute responsibility for your attitude, your character, and your fate. You realize that the grid is transparent to you now. You see the strings moving the puppets, but you have cut your own strings. You are the only one in the theater who is not acting according to a script. You are the one who is writing the story. As you step forward, remember the law of the apex presence. To maintain your power, you must remain a student of the grid. Human nature is ancient and deep. It requires constant vigilance. Perform your cognitive audits daily. Monitor your shadow leaks. Refresh your tactical empathy. The moment you think you have mastered human nature is the moment you become a victim to it once again. Sovereignty is not a destination, it is a continuous frequency. Maintain that frequency with the discipline of a machine and the grace of a monarch. This is the conclusion of the human nature protocol. You have the tools, you have the vision, and you have the structural soul required for dominance. The arena is waiting. The hierarchy is shifting. The world is a sea of irrational horses waiting for a sovereign rider. Go forth and command the river. Let your results be the only proof of your status. Let your silence be the only answer to your critics. Let your empire be the only legacy that matters. You have moved from the light of illusion to the darkness of power. The crown is yours. Occupy it.